to actually go and do it
away from home.
Yeah, it's a seriously bold move. I think any time you face a Pep Guardiola team, any time you face Manchester City, you need players who are good on the transition.
What you're saying is we've got the wealth in forwards.
Yeah.
Use them. Hello everyone, welcome to the deep dive. It's Manchester City, it is Liverpool, it's the big one, it's Guardiola, Klopp, and it is this weekend at 12:30. We're going to take a look at Manchester City, we're going to take a look at Liverpool, and we're going to theorise, I suppose, Josh, how they are going to play off against each other this weekend. Obviously, massive run of 3 games for Liverpool, Manchester City, Chelsea, and then Arsenal in the race for top 4. Josh, let's start with Manchester City. Then they've been playing this sort of 3-2-4-1 formation. What do you make of it so far, I suppose?
I think it's interesting. It's very Guardiola, isn't it? And I feel like, I'm not sure if I'm right in saying this, but I feel like the first time we saw it was at Anfield away. And it felt like a really bold decision for him to make. Didn't really work particularly well for him. But this is what makes a kind of tactics preview against the Guardiola team so interesting. Like if we did a tactics preview against Sean Dyche's Burnley.
I was just thinking Sean Dyche, and you're thinking, nah, it's going to be a bit boring.
Yeah, it's just not that special, is it? Whereas Guardiola, you just never know what you're going to get. And certainly earlier in the season when we faced him, we beat them 1-0 at Anfield. That kind of captures how experimental he is maybe as a coach, and what you're seeing there on the tactics board already is where we're going to start, and that is just what he used when he came to Anfield.
And the thing that draws my eyes is obviously from this game, the first thing that I see, because it's talked about so much in the sort of tactics community at the moment, Josh, is this box midfield. So we've got these 4 players here.
Yeah.
And is that something that you think Guardiola was trying to get to?
Potentially. I mean, Guardiola's always obsessed with this kind of like dominance in the centre, always having more men than the other coach in the middle of the park and things like that, just to give himself superiority in the middle of the pitch. But I think it was predominantly about this triangle over here, if I'm honest. Mm-hmm. If you look at who these players were on the day, it's worth noting that that's the kind of system, right, that you would usually see once your team has the ball.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. That was how Guardiola set up his team from the off, like all phases, basically. These 2 players in a normal system would probably be wing backs, and they'd maybe be there like that, and it'd be like a back 5 defensively. And then when you've got the ball, it'd become a back 3.
Yeah.
But this was Foden. This was Phil Foden on the day, deployed as a left wing back on the side of Mo Salah, by the way. This was Cancelo, and this was Gundogan, I think, and this was De Bruyne. This was Bernardo Silva. So I think the idea from Guardiola's perspective was, we're Liverpool weak.
Overload, right-hand side, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Gundogan, exactly. Bernardo Silva and Phil Foden.
Exactly. You've got a trident there, like a little trio, exploiting Liverpool's weakest area. It wasn't Trent who played on the day, actually, but it's Milner. You know what I mean? Milner's 37. Van Dijk's over here, Robertson's over here. Thiago might have been on this side of the pitch as well. So I think practically it made a bit of sense for it to look like that on paper, at least, because you're overloading Liverpool's weakest side. And
you got to remember as well, Josh, sorry to interrupt, we had Harvey Elliott in here. Yeah. So it's Harvey Elliott, it's James Milner, it's Mo Salah. So not only are you overloading Liverpool's weakest point, but probably the least defensive of the midfielders as well.
Yeah. It was a risky system to employ, simply because defensively, I mean, it's always employing that, right, if you're going to have the ball all the time. And they usually do. But against Liverpool at Anfield, that's quite a bold move, because if the ball is a bit more bouncing between posts and a little bit more basketball than you're used to, and that's your shape, defensively, if Liverpool can get you on the break a few times, you've got 5 players who are basically out the game immediately, ahead of the ball and that. And that was kind of what happened, really. You've got a back 3 and a midfield 2. Liverpool found a lot of joy in like these areas here. I mean, that's a big open space that for Rodri and Bernardo Silva, I think it was, to manage. And I remember Liverpool having a lot of joy in the break, and I remember like podcasting at the time and that, and it felt very, I think it was a time where we watched the game, didn't we, and we were a bit like, this feels like the Liverpool of old. Liverpool are back, Klopp's Liverpool have returned and all this stuff, because we were playing on the break and things like that, like we used to with Klopp.
I think that's right, isn't it? I think, you know, the thing that I'm looking at here when he done this, I say I was drawn to the sort of box midfield of it. I think you're absolutely spot on about your point there. One thing I will say is he's, over the course of this season, it's not quite been the same way of getting 4 men in the middle of the park. Now, there was a game against Arsenal a few weeks ago when it was billed as, you know, first v second, the Manchester City won the game, didn't they? And actually, what it started out like for them at the time was, if I remember correctly, it was a bit more like that. A bit more 4-3-3, you'd think, but Bernardo Silva was left back. Right?
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is he ends up shifting inside in possession to create the box midfield. They shift across to make the 3-man.
Yeah.
And these guys, I think it was maybe Grealish and Mahrez become a front three, and he had the overload against Arsenal in the middle of the box there.
Yeah.
In the middle now, Arsenal play to try and get a box midfield as well.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a stalemate, and it kind of didn't work. And in the end, he ends up subbing off Mahrez, moving Bernardo Silva out here. And I think he brings a centre half on, is it Akanji or something?
Yeah.
I think he brings Akanji on, and then he brings and moves Ake to left-hand side. Now, Ake against Saka was a lot more difficult for Saka than Saka against Bernardo Silva out there. Yeah. And he kind of went back to that sort of 4-3-3. But it is something that he's tried to get in, is that box midfield in different ways. And I wonder whether that's what he's going to do against us. And instead of it being that 3-2-4-1, I wonder whether he's going to try and get it to be a 3-4, essentially, in a box, and a 3. But it's really interesting to see how they work Haaland in, because that was the thing in the game against Anfield, wasn't it, Josh? They couldn't really get Haaland in with the way that they'd kind of set up.
Yeah, well, obviously, the idea with the box is, as I said, to have dominance in the middle of the park, to have more bodies than Liverpool. Liverpool obviously play with a midfield 3 sometimes. This was very much a 4. But the issue with it sometimes is, if obviously De Bruyne, and I think it was Gundogan on the day, join the forwards in the final third, rather than it being a box and it being a 4 in the middle, it can be a 2. And as I said, there was a lot of space in the middle for Liverpool to use. I felt on the day, in reference to Haaland, City really did us a favour in terms of, I feel like they were really kind of obsessed with control at Liverpool, and it was about a slow tempo, and you could tell it was in their heads, you know, don't get the crowd up and things like that. That's
important though when you're playing in Anfield. Again, I referenced the Arsenal game. Sometimes Guardiola goes into games and says, don't let the crowd get into the game.
Yeah.
And by being slow, by being pedestrian, by thinking about what you're doing, Josh, you can take the crowd out of it. Because I think, look, I love the atmosphere at Liverpool. It's absolutely one of the best atmospheres in the country. But after about 20 minutes, if your team hasn't had the ball, like anywhere else, it can go like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Guardiola might have been counting on.
Yeah, well, the issue with him doing that is when they kind of got opportunities to really cut through Liverpool quickly from A to B at the drop of a hat, really, they hesitated almost, played a few sideways passes, played a few backwards passes, and didn't really kill us in transition like they could have, especially with him up front. You know what he's like. But this is what I felt Arteta got right when we faced Arsenal away from home. They were very much Saka, Martinelli, go as soon as you can, cut right through Liverpool. And I think they scored 3, didn't they, at the Emirates against us, Arsenal. Whereas City, we kept a clean sheet. And I think a lot of that stemmed from, by the time City had got in a position where they wanted to try and attack, we had every man behind the ball.
Yeah.
We had a block. And it was a totally different game to what we played the past couple of months against Forest, Brentford, you know, all these teams, because we were suddenly able to defend as a unit, as a block, and we were able to attack on the break. And it was just, it played into our hands completely.
You think about the goal. The goal is just Alisson Becker in this game, isn't it? And he hoofs the ball up. Salah turns the centre half, drives on it, scores the goal.
Yeah.
A to B, as you sort of mentioned before. Liverpool take advantage of that. Wasn't quite the same in the cup game though, was it, in the Carabao Cup?
No, it was slightly different in that game. I think they played with a 4-3-3. But I never know how much to make of domestic cup games like that, because you just never know. I just don't feel like he would overthink as much for some reason. I don't feel like he'd experiment as much tactically in a game that in his own head doesn't overly matter as much as Premier League clash, you know, up in lights and things like that. But in terms of Haaland, I do feel like they could have played into him a lot quicker, used the fact that Liverpool are vulnerable in transition this season, but they didn't, and he failed to score against Liverpool again.
Well, let's try and make some predictions then for this one before we talk about how Liverpool line up against Guardiola's side. A prediction for you, how do you think Manchester City are going to line up this time?
Well, the issue this time, I did toy in my head with the prospect of him doing this again, because he does tend to do like Guardiola. When he thinks he's right and it's just been executed badly, he'll try and do it again, yeah. But Cancelo is now in Germany, and Foden is now injured. So for that reason, this looks unlikely, because he's probably got as his fullbacks Kyle Walker and Nathan Ake, I would guess. So I think he will go with a back four. And I think for most of the season, it's been a toss-up between 4-3-3 and 4-2-3-1. I think it will be 4-2-3-1, I think, simply because he got some joy out of having that kind of back six to build against Liverpool's usually a front three, isn't it? And in that sense, you've got a 10 there, you can keep Haaland away from the ball. That's what I think he will lean towards, but you just never really know with him.
I'm going to go back to he goes to the three at the back.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say he plays the two-man midfield and he plays the four. And I think that's how he's going to set up. So I think Nathan Ake will probably be over here trying to deal with Mo Salah.
Okay.
Maybe Ruben Diaz or Akanji or Stones. Could be Kyle Walker as well. I'm not going to try and predict the names. I think he's going to have, you know, one of Rodri's going to be in the middle of the park somewhere. I think Gundogan always plays well against us. So if he's fit and available, he's in there with Kevin De Bruyne in here. Maybe a Mahrez or a Grealish out there with a Haaland, something like that. And then that just leaves me the Bernardo Silva question. And I'm kind of the same way as you went. You know, he is very bullish. And I wonder whether what he tried against Arsenal, where Bernardo Silva has to cover this space, is what he wants. Because ultimately, I think what every manager wants and why Guardiola goes with the box or tries to have a box at times, certainly why Arteta goes with the box, why I think we've seen at times Trent Alexander-Arnold go into the middle. You are trying to establish superiority on the football field at some point in some area. So what that might mean is, let's say there's three lads in here. Right, you got three lads. Well, I've got four. So you're going to have to come up and pick one of these guys. What happens here? Who takes that man? Is he the free man? Well, if he goes over there, he's in space. So if he pushes on, he might get into space. Well, does the defender come on and then he's in space? And it's all about finding space. And I think the best option for that at the moment in football is just having a numerical advantage in the middle of the park. And I think he's pretty certain that Jurgen's going to set up with a three-man midfield. And because he's going to set up with a three-man midfield, I expect him to have four lads in the middle.
Yeah. Well, one of the beauties as well of using a four is because it can be kind of overwhelming for the opposition, because you've got so many bodies in the centre of the pitch. You can kind of almost get drawn in to cope with that. And as a result of that, these two lads here are usually got 1v1s all the time.
And which they might not utilise this one, but they might utilise this one against who they deem to be Liverpool's sort of weakest. And again, a Jack Grealish dribbling against a Trent Alexander-Arnold or something like that, a Mahrez dribbling against flipping anybody. Seems to be the way. We know Mahrez scored a great goal with it. You know, his first touch was absolutely fantastic last time out against us, wasn't it? Where he brings that inside and he sticks it into the net. Very Iron Robin, I know what you're going to do, but you can't stop me type of stuff. Yeah. But I can't stop you, I should say. So it's really interesting. Is there anything else you want to talk about on Manchester City before we sort of move on?
Well, I think one thing is, regardless of how they set up, the beauty of facing Guardiola is you kind of always know roughly what to expect and roughly what you've got to stop. And Klopp talked about this in the past. Generally, City will try to progress through the middle, obviously, using the half spaces here and here, De Bruyne and whoever's over here, essentially. If they can't do that, the ball will get forced out wide and they will try and engage in 1v1s here unless you force them back. So I think generally, if you block off the half spaces And if you ensure that these passes out wide, they're unable to like receive the ball, face you up and then go at you. If you instead get tighter and force them backwards or something like that, you can cause them problems, you can ask questions of them. We've been really good at doing that over the past couple of years. That's just something that Klopp gets as fundamental basics that you have to do to stop a Guardiola team. And there's different ways you can do that. And obviously we're gonna talk about Liverpool next in terms of what they might do.
Absolutely, and I think just to sort of add on to that, I would say the converse is absolutely true as well. I think Manchester City always want us to play down the wings, and they don't like us building up through the centre either. So as always, between these two great managers, it is going to be a tactical battle. Jurgen's probably more set in his ways in terms of that, and Pep Guardiola's more, let's roll the dice, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this. And it always makes for a fascinating tactical battle when you take the emotion out of football looking back at these games, doesn't it? So let's have a little look at Liverpool now. Okay, so we've got Liverpool on the board. They're obviously going in the other direction. So goalkeeper, 4 defenders, 3 midfielders, 3 forwards, heading left to right as you're looking at it. Josh, in this one, we've set Liverpool up in 4-3-3, but we utilised the 4-4-2 last time.
Yeah, well, this is probably how Klopp will set up, to be honest. I mean, this is probably how it will go, and this is probably what most fans would pick because it's the go-to and things like that. It's City away and things. I have a feeling we could go for a 4-4-2 in this one. As you said, we've done it earlier in the season and it worked. It got a victory for us. And we've also done it away at the Etihad before, a couple of years back. I think it was 2020, and it was 1-1.
When he threw Jota on with the other strikers.
Yeah. That was when Jota was kind of bursting onto the scene. He was making a real statement, as in like, let me in the team ahead of like Mane or something like that potentially. And Klopp ended up just picking all 4, which was a ballsy move, to say the least, away at the Etihad. But, I mean, is this what you would go for?
I can imagine that Liverpool set up in a 4-3-3 formation. Yeah. I think, it's just... There's not been loads of training time. Obviously, the last internationals, I think, were Tuesday, weren't they? So you're probably looking at lads getting back earliest Wednesday. Yeah. Thursday training. Light work Friday. Saturday morning kickoff. Not too much time to embed any tactical changes per se, but as you say, we've played this mid-block against Man City before. And should we show the graphic actually of what Liverpool, how Liverpool defended? So if you're watching this now, you can see on your screen, you've got the 4 Liverpool defenders. You can see Manchester City's forwards there. Kevin De Bruyne in the half space between the 2 lines of Liverpool's defenders and midfielders, and then it was Sadio Mane, was it, in this example? Is this the COVID season where Mane drops in to make the 4? Yeah. And then you got Bobby Firmino and Mo Salah as the 2, and not pressing high up the field, dropped into very much a mid-block, Josh.
Yeah, well, I found this really interesting at the time. This was when Liverpool were still good.
Those times. We missed them.
We had no one in the stadiums either. We don't miss them times, do we?
No.
But yeah, this was kind of out of nowhere. This previous few seasons, Guardiola had kind of one by one had another go at getting the better of Klopp, and he was getting there. He was getting there with a 4-2-3-1 mainly, and I think Klopp went away to the Etihad in this game. Jota was in form, in addition to Salah, Mane, Firmino, and he found a way to incorporate Jota, and he did it using a 4-4-2. As you can see there, Mane's on the left, Jota's on the right, and you've got a front 2 there of Salah and Firmino. But it really disturbed City in this game, particularly the first half an hour, because Guardiola weren't expecting it. I don't think City's first shot in this game came until the 25th minute.
They're normally 3 up by then.
Yeah, but if you look at specifically the way in which Liverpool defended without the ball, rather than playing like this on the tactics board now, which would be a bit of a high press, with covering the whole pitch, it was a bit more mid-block, everybody a bit more tight, but crucially, it was Salah and Firmino attaching themselves to, is it Rodri and Gundogan in the middle? So if Stones or Diaz or whoever it was had the ball here, the passing option into the midfield, which we know Guardiola's obsessed with, the player who touches the ball more than anybody on a per-90 basis this season in the Premier League is Rodri. So that caused major issues for City. And on top of that as well, you've obviously got Kevin De Bruyne and might have been Bernardo Silva occupying like the half spaces here.
De Bruyne used to play over to the left a bit more, didn't he? So I think,
yeah. In fact, I think in this game, De Bruyne was the 10 on his own, actually, wasn't he? And you had a player out here. But De Bruyne was kind of popping up in this half space, he was popping up in that half space. But the way in which Liverpool kind of prevented that from happening was, rather than this player taking care of him, or him, or him, or him, it was the wide lads, and they tucked in like this. And again,
say this is lanes.
Yeah, block the passing lanes, yeah.
So they're giving them a pass maybe here, and just to bring on another, the back four.
Yeah.
They're giving them a pass here and here.
Yeah.
And they're saying, you can go around us, but you're not going to feed your sexy fucking lads who like the ball loads.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, if you look at the vis again, if we can get it up again, that is very much, you have to go around us. You can't go through us. It's not a great example of cutting off a passing lane to De Bruyne, but the ball's kind of in between the two centre-halves anyway.
Yeah, this time.
And as it reaches the man who it's going through, I think it might be Laporte, I assume Jota there would then tuck in and block that passing lane to De Bruyne. But it is worth noting back then, our midfield two here, Jordan Henderson 3 years ago, and Gino Wijnaldum, who we know was just relentless with his availability and his fitness and stuff like that. Now, do we have any midfielder with the legs of them? Either of them?
So is the question here then, Liverpool decide to play this 4-4-2 from a couple of years ago. How do we deploy that 4-4-2 with the players that we've got available?
Kind of. It's more a case of like, I mean, if you do it like that, that's a really narrow midfield. So even if these two lads couldn't really cover that much ground, because it's so narrow and so compact, maybe they'd get away with it. My worry would be more, you know, if this is, say, I don't know, Nunes or something like that, maybe a bit more naive on the tactical side, and he's caught up here or something like that, and you've got Fabinho covering all this, that would be more of a worry. But it would depend how we do it. And one of the reasons I think this is a possibility in terms of the personnel is because even if we was to go with a 3, if you think of who our third midfielder might be, Harvey Elliott, Naby Keita, Milner, whereas our fourth attacker, Nunes, Jota, Gakpo, Firmino, just much higher quality for me. That's why I think a 4, as in like a 4-4-2 or something like that, it must be kind of attracting Klopp a little bit.
Can I give you one then? I'm gonna take the Man City players off for now, just because I don't want them to confuse it. If I was setting this formation up and I'd been tasked with, Josh, you turned around to me, Chris, you're managing Liverpool for one game, you've got to play a 4-4-2, you've got to play a mid-block. How are you going to set it up?
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to go Robbo, I'm going to go Virgil van Dijk, Canate, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Don't think anybody would question that. Maybe some people would question Milner back in there instead of Trent Alexander-Arnold. I would probably be looking at starting like that with the end game of getting into that formation. So, Mo Salah rolls across, centre forward rolls across.
Centre forward is?
Nunes.
Okay.
Right? Gakpo tucks inside. Fabinho's this side. Maybe that's Fabinho, maybe that's Jordan Henderson, whatever. Don't know. Harvey Elliott becomes your right.
Okay.
And that might be your Gakpo, your Harvey Elliott, your Fabinho, Jordan Henderson. I might have rotated that slightly wrong. But that might be, if you set me the task, who I would want in those formations. Because I want Nunes to stretch Manchester City. I think he can stand in front of a player tactically, which is all he's supposed to do in that situation in terms of being in front of Rodri with maybe Mo Salah or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe if you didn't want to do that, you could throw Bobby Firmino back in there, to be fair. But I do like the idea of being able to work into the channels with these two lads from those positions. I think Harvey Elliott's comfortable there and comfortable here, so it kind of makes sense for Harvey to be there. Your Fabinho, your Jordan Henderson kind of makes sense there as well. Hendo's played the left-hand side enough now to be able to go, you know what, I can drop in there, Fabinho can shuffle out there. And I think Gakpo's a clever player. I think Gakpo's not bad in these areas, so it kind of stands to reason that he's a left winger. he's playing well in those situations. Let's get him in there and see that.
Yeah.
How would you do it?
Well, even what you've just said there, I think it's worth noting. Elliot did play there in the win that we got earlier in the season. I think he played on the right. Might have had a few injuries. This was Jota, Salah, Firmino up front. But what you've just said there, the role that you've kind of just described for Elliot, sounds a bit like what Gakpo kind of did against Madrid. Is there any prospect of that again? Even though it didn't work on the day.
So who'd you play on the left-hand side then? Is that Núñez and that Bobby or Jota?
Well, I think if I was to go with a 4-4-2, I would have Núñez there. I wouldn't have him there because in a 4-4-2,
what I've just sort of done as well, yeah.
Yeah, in a 4-4-2, you're a bit more of a midfielder if you're playing out wide, and I think Núñez is at his very deepest a wide forward. But in this system, I would have him there. I would have Salah there. Gakpo there.
You just said Gakpo there?
I didn't. Rewind it back.
Okay.
No, I was toying with that idea. I know what you're saying. I was toying with that idea, yeah. I was just saying, like, that was just a possibility for you. In terms of who I would have over there, though, I mean, the game that we've referred back to from 3 years back, it's Jota over there. I think Jota could do it. Elliot could do it. My worry with Elliot would be, I think any time you face a Pep Guardiola team, any time you face Manchester City, you need players who are good on a transition. And I think Elliot is, but he's not as
speed.
He's not quick. He's not as direct as Jota. He's not like, ability to cover so much ground, because chances are we're going to regain the ball like here-ish. So you've got to cover all that. Elliot has to make passes to cover that, really, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think generally he probably makes better decisions on the ball than Jota does. But I think Guardiola would worry more about a Jota than an Elliot, just because of the nature of how he plays, the whole control, slow tempo and territorial dominance and things like that. But there's loads of different ways Klopp can do it. But I do think that given Thiago's injured, we don't really have much of a midfield anyway. We've now got returning forwards. Diaz maybe even could be somewhere in the conversation. I don't know how fit he is. Gakpo's never played City before. We've got Gakpo added to the mix. Jota, I think, only played about 3 minutes during the international break, so he's fresh. Núñez stayed behind. So I think
what you're saying is we've got the wealth in forwards.
Yeah.
Use them, is what you think, Jurgen. And that's what you said. You didn't say he's going to. You said he's going to have been tempted by the fact that he's got 4 strong forwards.
Yeah. I mean, to actually go and do it
away from home.
Yeah, it's a seriously bold move. The reason I think it's possible is because he surprised me in the past doing it. 3 years back, he went to the Etihad and just put 4 forwards on the pitch. Yeah. So he has done it in the past. But to be fair to him, one of the players here in the past was Firmino, defensively ridiculous, and that was Mane, again defensively ridiculous. Now, Gakpo's been in the door for 2 months, and Núñez, I don't even think he speaks the same language as Klopp yet, so it'd be a bit more of a... And the midfielders can't run. So.
This is kind of why I sort of went and I started that with that. Because I think if there's a rotation in there, it kind of makes it a little bit more possible.
Yeah.
In that, so you've got your Harvey Elliott, you've got your Fabinho, you've got your Jordan Henderson. Do it again.
Yeah, so you would defend in a 4-3-3.
I would defend in the 4-4-2.
Oh, you'd defend in the 4-4-2?
And I would try and break out into the 4-3-3, where Salah's over on the left.
Yeah.
You've got Núñez maybe, Gakpo, and like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There's loads of different possibilities. The thing is with Núñez as well, playing out wide, anywhere out wide really, is the fact that he probably be up against Kyle Walker, which is probably why you want to move him inside a little bit.
That's why Núñez is my centre forward. Yeah. Because remember, I'm moving Gakpo back here, and Salah across, and Elliott to get me.
Yeah. And over on that side, you've obviously got Nathan Ake, which
is Salah.
Yeah, exactly. I think Nathan Ake's previously said, like, he's one of the toughest opponents he's faced. But even if he goes
against him, though.
Even if he goes with 4 forwards, though, Klopp, he's still got a bench 1. And naturally, you'd probably think, well, Firmino. But away at the Etihad, Firmino's your best defender. You would consider starting them and maybe introducing one of the quicker lads on like the hour mark when everyone's getting tired, something like that. But at least we've got options for once.
Yeah, and then I think the only other thing we really probably need to think about just quickly is how are we going to deal with the overload that Man City are able to get. And, you know, we've seen them time and time again, specifically target, and we'll put maybe Manchester City on it. I'll put it in 3-2-4-1 that you wanted to go with. So we're getting them on the field there. Right, how on earth do Liverpool stop this little triumvirate, which they're going to try and get around Trent Alexander-Arnold? And is it just the case of...
It might have to be, yeah. It might have to be. And then we kind of break as a unit. And that's why you would need transition players who can run. Like if you've got him, and him, all of whom are quick, that wouldn't be that much of a problem. You'd also want, in some way, to isolate Liverpool's front three with their back three. I think would be a bit of a mismatch. But in terms of how you stop Guardiola, it's difficult, isn't it? I think the main thing, as I said, is blocking access to certain zones of the pitch. And I think if you can somehow force them around you rather than through you've got kind of a springboard there to kind of take into the rest of the game. But in terms of how you stop is it the box that you kind of refer to?
No, the three fellas you were talking about before, and the overload on there. And the problem is, you say you can put it down like this for a Manchester City side and say, well, they got three players over there, and then all of a sudden Kev the Red goes, see you later, and he joins them for no reason. And it's like, well, how do you deal with that?
I know. I mean, I suppose it's beneficial that we're potentially going to have Kanate there, because he's a bit more of a defensive monster in terms of when he's coping on his own. But City guaranteed again. I mean, Guardiola's done it quite a few times now. It's not just this season. He has targeted Trent relentlessly. I remember a few seasons back he basically played to Leroy Sané every time, and Trent had like his best defensive game ever, I think, in that game. But he does always target that side, and that's because it is Liverpool's weakest side. But we just need to kind of...
Maybe he'll pep himself and target Robbo this weekend. It's entirely possible. It's one of them, innit? Jab, 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 big left up or something like that, you know what I mean? Where he just goes, I'm just going to do something completely different that I've never done before. I might even play 1 at the back and 10 up front, because I'm Pep Guardiola and it's what I do. So it does promise to be an incredible tactical game. Hopefully the result goes Liverpool's way. Hopefully Jurgen comes out on top in this. But regardless, looking back at these games is always really interesting, isn't it, Josh?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this one. That's the Manchester City preview. We've got another deep dive episode coming out a little bit later on today, I think, over on Redmen Plus. You can use the code DEEP to get 50% off for your first 3 months. So if you like the deep dive shows that we're doing every single week on YouTube, there's an extra one available to you with the entire catalogue and suite of Redmen shows over on redmenplus.com. Use the code DEEP as if you sign up for a monthly club captain. You will get that for 50% off for 3 months. Thank you so much for watching. Do us a favour, if you enjoyed the video, like the video. I'll see you next time. Ciao.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching that show. Did you know if you go over to redmenplus.com and sign up as a Club Legend subscriber, you will get access to our amazing Discord chat, 20% off merchandise, live tickets every year for free, plus all our incredible content, and you'll get absolutely everything right as it happens. So get over there and do it.